Welcome back to the Share Parenting Podcast. This is Sammy Bell, and this is the Ways We Mom series. On this series in the podcast, we talk to lots of different moms about what makes their story unique, who might relate to their story, and what they hope others can learn from their experience in motherhood. We are in this together, and I believe the more we share our stories, the more that we realize we are not alone. So today, we are joined by Sarah Hofer, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She lived in California and came out to my neck of the woods in Idaho, and she is mama to 3 beautiful children, and the rest of that is why she's here. So tell us a little bit about your family, Sarah.
Sure. My husband and I have 3 kids. Our twin boys are 3.5, and our daughter is 2 and a couple of months. So they are 18 months apart.
Wow. So you're busy.
We are very busy. It's a very busy household. We also have a giant dog, so throw that into the mix and you pretty much have a constant circus.
I love it. Now, you had the twins first, obviously, and even just with them, there's a bit of a unique story there, right?
There is, yeah. So my husband and I had decided that we were ready to have kids, and so we started trying and got pregnant with the twins, which was a total shock because we don't have twins in our family. So side note, funny story is that I went in and they missed twins on the first ultrasound, and then on the second ultrasound when I saw a specialist for something else, the ultrasound tech didn't realize that I didn't know, so she told me accidentally that I was having twins. Whoops. It was the start of a very interesting journey. So our boys are what's called monochorionic diamniotic, which means they're identical, and they shared a placenta. So that's a normal twin thing, but along the way we discovered that they weren't sharing things properly in the womb, which they still don't. But one of our little guys was getting way too much amniotic fluid, and he was taking the bulk of the nutrients from the placenta, and the other had almost no amniotic fluid and wasn't getting enough nutrients. So the shortest version is that I ended up having to have surgery while I was pregnant. They had to go in and sever some blood vessels on the placenta while I was pregnant in order to help balance out which baby was getting what.
Now, when you realized that you were having twins, from the time you realized you were having twins to the time you realized that they were at risk, how much time had passed?
No time at all, actually. So that it was in that very first appointment, I was 13 weeks pregnant, and they told me, "Oh, surprise, you're having twins."
Gotcha.
Oh, and by the way, you're having a high-risk type of twin called monochorionic diamniotic, and it's likely that we're seeing the beginning signs of something called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome,
okay.
Which is that condition I just described. So yes, I was digesting the news of having twins and the likelihood of a major complication in the same day.
Oh my word.
Yeah, that was a lot.
What did your husband say about twins?
I feel like I probably could have picked his jaw up off the floor. He was sitting next to me. And he didn't say much, and neither did I. We both kind of wondered if the doctor or the ultrasound tech was kidding. When she assured us that she wasn't, we both just started laughing. we were happy. We wanted kids, and we were happy and thankful for the pregnancy, but very shocked.
I bet.
Yeah.
Now, how far along were you when you guys had to actually have the surgery?
I was 24 weeks on the dot. So they'd been monitoring my condition all along. And then I went in at 23 weeks in a couple of days, and my I think he's a perinatologist, I think is his official title, said, we're seeing the signs that, it's progressed into stage 1 at this point, and I need you to go see a surgeon tomorrow, and it's likely you're going to have surgery in the next day after that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he saw me, he had me go see a surgeon in Pasadena the next day, and it moves quickly. So in that 48-hour span between the time that I was told there's a problem significantly and you're having surgery to the time I had surgery, one of my baby's hearts had started to fail because his heart couldn't pump the blood and the amniotic fluid through quick enough. So that was a very dark couple of days for sure.
I bet.
They had told us, one of your twins, his heart is failing. And so we were obviously stunned and wondering what our options were. And he gave us 5 options. And my husband said, bottom line, which is the one that gives both of our children a shot at life. And the doctor said, well, your only option that presents that as even a possibility is surgery. And so without question, that's what we decided to do.
That's amazing. That,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it takes so much strength and courage, and yet I'm certain at the time you were not feeling strong or courageous.
Right. No, I was not. I actually, in that appointment with the surgeon, I actually couldn't even talk, to be honest. I was looking at the surgeon, making eye contact, but I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where it's like, if you open your mouth at all, you're going to start crying and not sure if you're going to be able to stop. Mm-hmm. It was one of those because there was just such intense fear and anxiety in that moment. And what he was telling me essentially was, your kids, you could lose them at any moment, and the surgery is not a guarantee. I think he said something like a 50% or 60% chance of survival, even with the surgery for both kids.
Wow. So at what point did you learn the surgery worked? They're both going to make it?
So shortly, I think an hour after surgery, they looked at heartbeats and both were strong. They gave me a certain list of markers. So we're going to check you again after 24 hours. And then we're going to check you again in a week. And then from then on, it'll be every 2 weeks. And they just told me, every time that that we find both heartbeats, the chance of them making it is going to get stronger and stronger.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So the diciest moment was an hour after surgery, because they lose a lot of kiddos during surgery. And so the surgeon told us, if they made it through, that's a really good sign. And they did, both very strong heartbeats.
That's amazing. And they're 3.5 now.
They're 3.5, and you'd never know that they went through something like that because they move and talk and scream and make all sorts of noise and
jump off of couches, break each other's arms. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. Not so much fun, that part. But it is fun to watch them run around and be healthy.
Yeah. Now, was that the end of it? You had the surgery and then you guys made it through, or was there more?
No. So we had the surgery and I was on bed rest from that point on. they were hoping to get me to at least 32 weeks with bed rest. I made it to 35.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so that was awesome. We knew going in, because they had seen it on an ultrasound, we knew that one of our sons had a club foot.
Okay.
We were prepared for that, and they had walked me through, what treatment for that looks like, and kind of what he could expect throughout his life. And we knew that would be challenging, but we're comfortable with kind of what we were going to need to do. I did have a C-section unplanned at 35 weeks because my water broke.
Okay.
And I kind of knew that a C-section was coming, so that wasn't a surprise to me. I wasn't upset about that. What happened, though, is there was something wrong with, they call him Baby B, because they name your babies in pregnancy, Baby A and Baby B. So Baby B, who is Caleb now, he wasn't crying when they originally, when he was born, and the crowd of nurses around him cleaning him up kept getting bigger and bigger. So obviously Mike and I knew, okay, something's not right here. It turns out he had something called tracheoesophageal fistula, which meant that his stomach was connected to his trachea. So his trachea connected to his lungs and his stomach, and his esophagus ended in a blind pouch. They did not see that on an ultrasound, so that was another big shock. Oh. And they were trying to obviously keep a new mom calm. Mm-hmm. So telling me, oh, we're just going to take him to the NICU for observation. And that turned into, oh, by the way, your baby's going to need major surgery even though he's 10 hours old.
Wow.
So that, I think, was really challenging for me because everyone got to be there for Caleb, except me. Because I had the C-section, I was stuck in my room, while everyone else got to be in the waiting room and do all of the normal things that one might do when a loved one's in surgery. Mike, my husband, was able to convince one of the doctors to come to my hospital room, actually, and talk to me and give me the update in person. So that really meant a lot to me that he thought of me in that moment by myself in the hospital room. And gosh, it's going to make me cry now, but thought of me and how scared and lonely I must feel up in that room by myself.
Absolutely. And you say with such emotion, I wonder if that really ever goes away. I mean, when we experience these things, these big, scary things with our babies or with our children, do you think a piece of that just kind of sticks with us?
Yeah, I do, actually. I've kind of affectionately nicknamed it NICU PTSD because they did have a NICU stay after that. But the concept being that, yeah, after that, those fears and those major curveballs that get thrown at you, they do leave a mark, and they do bring up anxiety later, and it could be years later. You alluded to Zach breaking his arm, mm-hmm. And when he was in the hospital for that, for sure, all sorts of anxieties came rushing back.
That's pretty intense. Now, it's funny you say NICU PTSD because you're actually not the only mom who said that to me. I have a friend who used that exact phrase.
Yeah.
To reference her experience after having her babies in a NICU and then years later having one of her kiddos get hurt. So I think that's a very real thing, and it is something I'm grateful to have you here to talk about because I think that it's not something that moms should have to suffer in silence, but I think it's something they mostly do. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there is I think there's a stigma sometimes, like, so after Caleb's surgery was a success and after both my boys were fine, there is that, I think, oh, but your babies are healthy and everything's fine. And, you should be grateful and you should be thankful. And there isn't room sometimes for moms um, to feel all of their feelings, if that makes sense. And there isn't room sometimes for moms to um, acknowledge and work through the hard parts while still being grateful for the health of their child.
I think it is so important to recognize that we can have opposing feelings simultaneously. You
Oh,
can
totally.
feel incredibly grateful and overjoyed and happy, and also still have that pocket of grief. I mean, that was an intense thing that your family had to go through.
It
Step
was.
1, step 2, step 3, step 10, like it just kept going and going. And
Yeah.
yes, the end result is these happy, healthy 3.5-year-olds, and thank goodness. But
Yeah.
also, there's a real fear and trauma, and I think, like you said, in that moment, moms aren't often able to even feel those things fully because
Right.
it's
Oh no, you're
too
in
much.
fight mode.
Yeah. And so to give moms space and permission, if you will, to really like grieve that experience and the loss of normalcy. You people, they're like, oh, we're gonna have a kid, and then you just get pregnant and have a baby and you go home and everything's fine. And
Mhm.
for so many people, that's not always the case. And even if it ends up that they're home with their babies and their babies are okay, the in between matters. And we're doing a disservice if we pretend like only the outcome matters. The outcome does matter, but there is a story and a journey in there, and we can really support moms by allowing them to share that journey. As a therapist, have those skills that you learned in your training helped you to process? Did you ever seek outside help yourself?
Yes. The answer is yes to both of those questions. So to the first question, the skills as a therapist, how did that help? I think because I had counseled clients through grief before, I kind of at least had the bones of it to help myself a little bit. But it's so different when you're the one walking through the grief as opposed to being the professional that's walking with someone. Um, so it did give me some new insight into how to help people who are experiencing, I guess I'd call it atypical grief, because we think of grief as like someone died.
Yeah.
Uh, but grief, for me, I was grieving the beginning of motherhood and knowing that I didn't get that time to connect with my babies right off the bat, like that, feeling like that was kind of robbed from me. Um, and so I was able to kind of to use what I've learned as a therapist and what I've used to help clients in the past. Um, I guess the short version would be yes, it helped me so much to have those skills already, but the journey of using the skills was so much different than I thought it would be. Um, and I did seek help. In answer to your other question, I did. I saw a therapist for quite a while after that, and that was really helpful. I'm very glad I did that.
Do you think that you were able to heal all the way? Because very quickly you ended up pregnant with your daughter Maddie, and
I
so I'm
did.
wondering, did that in and of itself bring things up, or had you processed enough and that was sort of separate?
Um, I definitely don't think I had worked all the way through it. And her pregnancy, her conception did bring up a lot. There was already an intense fear of, something's going to go wrong this time. Um, I was kind of always waiting for the other shoe to drop at appointments, waiting for them to tell me, oh, actually, there's this problem happening. Now that never did. thankfully her pregnancy was very healthy. But I think that the entire experience was tainted with anxiety, because my previous pregnancy had been so full of anxiety, if that makes sense.
Of course.
And I'm trying to think of, I think I had a different expectation of, okay, I had a normal pregnancy, I had a healthy pregnancy. It's going to be like, I get to take my baby home from the hospital this time, and it's going to be so great, and I'm going to get like the bonding time that I want. And all of that was true. And yet it wasn't anything like I wanted or expected it to be. And that frustrated me and scared me, and I think brought on some postpartum depression and anxiety hard and fast that I wasn't expecting, especially after the birth of a healthy baby and an uncomplicated pregnancy. I thought, there's no way I'm going to have postpartum mental health issues. And that sort of hit me out of left field.
And isn't that another one of the stigmas that moms face? There's so much of like, well, what right do you have to be depressed? Everything's fine. And
100%. Yeah.
we don't get a choice in the matter.
Totally.
It just happens sometimes.
Right. Yeah. And I had a lot of support, and a lot of help. I have wonderful friends who were there for me, and who continue to be there for me to this day. I had my family close by. But I think what was one of the hardest parts was, even especially to, people who had never been pregnant, maybe never been in my shoes, I had such a hard time conveying what was going on for me internally. And I would just get so upset and so angry when I couldn't accurately express what was going on. And I think that made me close up and close myself off further. And that did myself a disservice. Honestly, I wish that I had been able to do that differently.
So my takeaways that I'm hearing are, one, that postpartum can hit anybody, postpartum depression, anxiety, and that there's no shame in that some of it can even be brought on by the incongruency between what you think your reality will be like and then what it actually is. That getting help is a great option. And speaking out, it sounds like it was really hard to speak out. And so for a period of time, you maybe just didn't, and that ended up being worse.
Yes, I think those are all great takeaways that I would say are really relevant here. Yeah, it can happen. I mean, I'm a therapist. I'm a trained therapist. I'm trained to deal with emotions, and it still hit me hard. And I still needed professional help to get through it. I would say that, yeah, one of the main things I'm hoping moms can take from this is, please don't beat yourself up. If it happens to you, it's not anything that you as a mom are doing wrong. Postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, it's not your fault at all. But without seeking the proper help, it can hinder your enjoyment of life, and it can hinder the view and the vision that you have for your family. So it's not your fault, but don't wait.
I like that advice. It's not your fault, and don't wait. Speak out, ask for help. Now, I have had some moms share with me their experience that it was hard to find help. So do you have maybe like 3 tips on finding a good postpartum therapist?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say, if it were me, I would seek out a therapist who specializes in postpartum issues. And actually, there's an organization called Postpartum Support International.
Oh, great.
And they actually have a directory of therapists who are trained specifically in this area all over the United States. So they have a directory. It's very unlikely that you would go to their directory and not find someone in your area. But it is so important to find a specialist that is knowledgeable about postpartum depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders. That is something that I didn't know when I was seeking help, and I wish that I had. Now, the person I had was wonderful and very helpful, and seeking therapy of any kind is great, but I think that women are going to get the most benefit out of seeking someone who's a professional in that aspect. There's a whole bunch of online directories. So Psychology Today is one of the most famous ones, and you can kind of check different areas that you're struggling with, and it kind of narrows your search down to help you figure out who in your area is best equipped to handle that. And then I would also say, before you start therapy, interview that person, maybe in a phone call, and ask about pieces of treatment that are important to you. So if it's important to you that, they give you homework every week, ask them about that. Ask them about their training and why they like to do postpartum depression and anxiety and mood disorder. Like why they offer that. Why did they choose that? You'd be surprised what you find out. But don't be afraid to advocate for yourself in finding a therapist. And just because someone says, yeah, I'm really good at this, and I feel like, I'm equipped to handle that, doesn't mean that you're going to connect with the person, and that's okay.
So it's okay to say, you know what, I don't feel like this is a good fit.
Totally.
Help elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because their expertise is only half of the puzzle.
Okay.
Their expertise is only half of the puzzle. The other half then would be feeling like you can connect to them and can trust them. So that's why I would say interview before you start to make sure that you feel as safe as you can meeting a virtual stranger in the beginning.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that. We will be sure to include the links that you mentioned so that moms can just click it and go look. I think that one question that might come up is, well, how do I know if I have postpartum depression? Do you need a diagnosis to go seek help? Like, could it just be that maybe talking to somebody would be helpful because you're a new mom and it's new and overwhelming?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, you don't need a diagnosis. In fact, I would caution against waiting for a diagnosis before you seek help. I think if you feel in your gut like something's off, listen to that. Listen to that, because you may be a new mom, but you're a mom and you know yourself, and you know if something's not right within your mind, within your spirit, that kind of thing. So absolutely don't wait for a diagnosis. And it might even be that you need a professional to help work through whether or not that diagnosis applies to you. And you may get into therapy and realize, oh, I don't have postpartum depression. That's okay. It's still really helpful to process what being a new mom is like.
Fantastic. I love it. I think we all deserve to have that person to support us and walk with us through what is such a transformational journey. I really love the analogy, the butterfly analogy that a mentor of mine had told me before. And it is that caterpillars, when they form their cocoon, a lot of people think that they just kind of sleep and then wings sprout out of their back and they come out a butterfly. But in fact, with tiny little microscopic cameras, we've been able to watch this transformation, and they actually dissolve into like goo and are reformed into a completely different creature. Like a butterfly is not just a caterpillar that sprouted wings. And that transformation, that really messy, complete and utter overhaul, that describes motherhood pretty well.
It does. That's a great analogy.
Right? You go in and you're like, I'm just gonna give birth, and then poof, I'll be a mom. But there's this green goo phase, as this mentor calls it. Her name is Beth Griffith, and she talks about the green goo phase in relation specifically to business. But anytime you're really becoming something new, you go through that green goo phase, and it's messy and weird and confusing. And another thing I read that I thought really made a lot of sense is, part of the reason it can be so challenging is because as an adult, you're used to doing most things with a certain level of competence. You don't typically do things that you don't have reasonable confidence that you're going to be able to do. And so, you cook and you pay bills and you work and you do whatever just as a regular adult. And then when you become a parent, you are suddenly thrown into this world that you have no idea what you're doing. And it's all encompassing. It affects every single aspect of your former life. And so to have something that big that you don't yet feel confident in can be really jarring. And it's okay that transition might need a little bit of extra support.
Definitely. That's really well put. I would agree 100% with that.
I love it. So one of the things that I really like to ask moms when I have them on the show is when you look at your parenting now, was it influenced by your pregnancy, birth, postpartum experience? Did you know before you had kids how you wanted to parent? Have any of those ideas changed since you had kids? Kind of that journey.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think what's carried over from my pregnancy is a little bit of anxiety, and maybe being overly cautious with helping too much when maybe the kiddos need room to grow and experience their own stuff, within reason, obviously. But I think that letting go process that's very normal as a kid grows has been a little harder for me than it may have been had I not experienced that anxiety. I have really great parents, and I had a good childhood, and I think now looking back on it, what's impacted me the most actually is you, Sammy, and reading your book, and knowing that some of my stuff is old stories that were not created intentionally, but were causing problems nonetheless. I didn't even know they were a problem until I had kids. And so being a parent has actually given me a unique opportunity to deal with some of my own stuff that I didn't know was present. And so reading your book and getting to meet you and talk to you, I was actually able to choose new and intentional ways of parenting that maybe I wouldn't have even thought about had I not encountered you.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. It makes me feel good. You write something and you hope that it helps people. But I mean, that's really the idea is to just encourage people to be mindful, to look at their experiences. And, so many of us, we do things and we never really do question why. And then if we have one of those old stories, which we all do, myself included, then we are being affected by that old story, and it feels powerless. It feels like, well, that's just how it is because it's how it is. But there's more to it. We can dig down and we can see, well, where did this come from? And we can challenge the thoughts and beliefs we have around that story. And if we want, we can rewrite that story. Some stories we don't want to rewrite. My in the book, I mentioned that there are certain aspects of my father's choice in parenting that I never wanted to emulate, but there are some that I do. I remember one little thing that stuck with me was, when you have a class that you basically hate, whether it's boring or whatever it is, maybe you just don't see the point of it. He said, okay, well, then look at it as an opportunity to train your brain in how to do boring, hard things. Forget about, I don't want to even put a subject to it, but, it was history. So uh, don't judge me. My husband hates that so much. He loves history, but it felt so pointless to me. And the frustration I felt with what I felt like it was a waste of time, it really helped me to look at it as, okay, well, what am I getting out of this? I'm learning how to do something that is hard for me. I'm learning how to challenge myself to find a way to gain benefit from something that I originally decided was useless. And that skill has applied to my entire life, especially my business. I get insight from business lectures. I get parenting topics for discussion from TikToks. I mean, like, you can learn something anywhere you go. And maybe because of that story in the back of my head, it makes me more open to input and to using that input to benefit my life, my kids' lives, my clients' lives. So we have those kind of stories. And then we have other stories that maybe we don't want to be there. And we have the ability to be really, really intentional about which stories we choose to keep and which stories we choose to boot. So I love hearing that you have been able to do that in your parenting. And I have had the pleasure of watching you parent, and you are an excellent mom, and I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm grateful that you're willing to come on and share some of your story, because I think that when we see somebody in our day-to-day, so often we focus just on the positive or that highlight or that moment, and we don't really know what the story is. We don't think, maybe this mom had a really harrowing journey to get to this point. And sometimes, because we know our own story and we know our own struggles, we feel less than, because we're looking at somebody who seems to have it all together and they're doing a great job. And somehow we assume that they must be like that 100% of the time. And we're the only ones that have all of the secret struggles. And that's not true. And I admire your vulnerability. I admire your ability to come and share with people, these really hard times. And, especially with having Maddie and being forced to walk through depression and anxiety that felt so out of place. Like, why is this here? And unfortunately, sometimes we don't get that answer, but we can't get through it. Right.
Right.
And that's what I hope to inspire people, that the therapist, the parenting mentor, like, we struggle too. And we've had to walk through these too. And you're not alone. I think that's the most important part. You're not alone. I love talking with you because your experience is really very different than mine in a lot of ways. My boys are 19 months apart, so like there's this similarity there, but you had twins and then a baby. I had a kid and then a kid, like, very different, and obviously a baby. I had a kid and a baby, but it just, the twins part does make that very, very different.
Yeah.
And I love gaining your perspective and your insight on those differences, because it's not something I can experience for myself. So I guess my next question would be, what is your favorite part? What's the best part? What's the highlight of having twins and then having, a toddler so close in age?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think the ages they are now, my boys being 3.5 and Madison being 2, has been my favorite so far. I've loved watching my boys become not just brothers, but best friends. So sometimes I just sit back and listen to them play, and their emotions are wild, and it's so fun to listen to. And it's really fun now to see them starting to incorporate Maddie into whatever they're doing. They don't always like her insistence on being part of things, but they're grudgingly kind of getting used to it. And so the other day, one of my boys was actually teaching her how to do something. And so watching them develop that relationship that I hope will be present for their entire lives has been just a joy to watch.
That's amazing. Best little friends.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely been one of my favorite parts of being a mom. And then also just watching their emotional intelligence develop too. Watching them learn how their actions and their words impact other people. And watching them get to learn that in a way that, you know, is safe. So they're not making like huge mistakes, but watching the little wheels turn in their heads as they figure out how to be in a healthy relationship with people and with each other is just incredible.
I love it. It must be really fun to watch kids develop from a therapist's perspective.
It is a blast. Yeah, it's a blast.
Oh, you're going to use those skills all throughout your life. Yay!
Yep, I'm going to make sure you use those as adults.
I love it. Now, for people who are seeking somebody to talk to, are they able to work with you? What criteria would they need to fall into to be able to actually work with you professionally?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely. So I see clients remotely and in my office in Eagle, Idaho. But I am also
under lockdown from a global pandemic.
We're under lockdown, yeah. So right now it would have to be virtual. But because I hold my California license still, I can also work with clients in California virtually. So if people aren't opposed to video sessions, that's a really great way to work with me. Right now here in Idaho, anywhere in the state is fine as long as you don't mind video sessions. And anywhere really in the Treasure Valley area, once this lockdown has been lifted, anyone's welcome to reach out and come see me at my office in Eagle.
Awesome. Now you had mentioned asking the therapist in question, so I will ask you, do you have postpartum support, training, such and such?
Yeah, good question. So I did undergo the training that Postpartum Support International puts on specifically for therapists who want to work with this population. So I do have some specialized training in this area. It's not just my own experience informing me. There's a certification actually that I'm in the progress of doing. The only part I haven't done is taken the test, but I've done all the training.
I love it.
It's fascinating, yeah. It's a whole different animal really than more typical depression and anxiety. There's just a different element to it, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Been there.
Yeah.
I've had traditional and I've had postpartum, and they are beasts.
Very different
colors.
Very different. Yeah.
I appreciate it. I am super excited. Anybody who is looking, who is in Idaho or in California, please reach out to Sarah. It is worth it. She is the most wonderfully non-judgmental human. She has a width and a breadth of knowledge that is so useful when you're looking at really problem solving and trying to find solutions. And if something doesn't work, there's another solution to try. So I think that's part of what I really am drawn to when I do talk to you, Sarah. And I will be sure to link your website below so that people can reach out to you there. And I am going to be bringing you back on to talk about relationships because of the marriage and family part of your licensure.
Right.
And hopefully I will have you as a guest speaker in the membership group as well, so people can gather your questions. We will do a Q&A, and you guys can throw them at Sarah and see what she's got for you. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming and joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to have this information for other moms to relate to and to just really know that they're not alone.
Yeah, thank you, Sammy, for having me. It was actually a pleasure to come and tell a little bit of my story and hopefully inspire other moms who maybe have gone through some of the same things. So I appreciate you giving me a chance to speak.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
Bye.